shared background data. And this is where all the validation of all the database tables that are important takes place. And if we just slide down from where your mouse is into spatial categorization, space categories, yeah, right up one, there we go, yeah. Okay, so there's FICM, and there's a lot to sort of explain here about the way our database looks and the way that we manage things, but every table is validated so that the spelling is right or the category code is right, etc. And this is critical to good database management. So if you just slide down a little bit, I'm not really sure how FISH came about. This is for Florida, and it's for K to 12, my understanding. And so it's similar to FICM, but different. You know, it's tracking the same sort of stuff, but different coding structure. And then at the bottom, you'll see OSCAR, which is the corporate world, open standards for commercial real estate. This is their data structure with regards to numeric codes and titles, and then the descriptions. So you know, the crossover is there, and obviously everybody's dealing with circulation and washrooms and you know, hallways and stairwells and major uses of space, whether they be offices or conference rooms. That's sort of universal. Then you get into things like labs and classrooms that are in your domain. So if we slide back up to the top there, you'll see that over on the right hand side, there's types and spaces. So you'll see that there are, if we just look at the office level, which is 300, you're familiar with that. There is if we slide down a little bit, there we'll see the types of offices that have been established, and they get a code. And to be honest, I'm not really sure where that abnormality at the very bottom there that you see, record under 6 records, why someone would have put in here cubicle, when in fact the type should be a numeric value. So that's an abnormality. We would always want to see in the FICM world the type having maybe that cubicle should be 365 or something like that. And I imagine you had developed quite a similar structure in your career.
It's it's pretty straightforward there. I can tell you at UC we had about 4 different types of offices. So so we had like 310-1, 310-2, 310-3 office, and then office service we had about 10.
Sure.
So we had copy rooms, mail rooms, just 10 or so different of those. The shared office we never did. I've never seen a 320 used, but that's, dealing with shared offices can be a valuable thing. And then the conference room and conference room service are pretty straightforward. Yep. We had the cubicle, by the way, underneath the 310. So it was like a 310-4 or something. But again, that's a little bit of a preference thing.
Those types, I don't believe FICM really has anything hard and fast about those numbers, like a 310. I think maybe they do, but you're allowed to make up whatever you need and not be, out of bounds. I think if down at the bottom here where it says save and delete, over on the far right it says next.
Yeah.
And if we
by the way, I was part of the committee that created the variants on our FICM settings, and that was this was more than 20 years ago, and it was a circus. because as we've discussed, everybody has their own perspective. And so, this one professor wanted a room type for, a fly storage facility room, and there was the one on campus and he wanted it to be its own room type. And it's like, oh no. And some people wanted there to just be 12 room types total. And I tell you what, getting a committee together to do something is a difficult task.
Yeah, especially if they don't
But
understand.
anyway,
If they don't understand database structure or coding structure or accounting basics, because this is really a space accounting system, and you don't
right.
go to the finance department at UC and tell them that you want to have a new account set up for something really obscure. You'd be laughed off out of the office. But in facilities, they seem to think that it's you can do anything you like. So what I wanted to show you is that there's a lot of depth here as to you can't make up a room type there. And at this point, I think what we're looking at is if we just slide up a little bit on the screen here.
We're at the library one now.
We're at library. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Study and they got the study. So all of this is familiar with you. I just wanted to show you where it is, and then you could click on any one of those spaces, and it will take you to that actual space. And so this is the space management form. And I just wanted you to get sort of familiar with, there's multiple ways to navigate to information. And there is all kinds of stuff. If you slide down a little bit here, here's your occupants and secondary occupants and the metrics around the occupancy. Obviously, it's in metric and in square footage there on the spatial metrics. You can have areas contained inside of areas, etc., which is very valuable. They used to be called donuts, which were problematic from a polylining point of view. So we've overcome that issue, and spaces inside spaces are not a problem. So again, I just wanted to show you that, and you can use the back arrow up at the upper left there.
Yep. And by the way, just getting real quick note on cubicles. We started out years ago where we tracked cubicles that were specifically people's workstations. Somebody's assigned to that as their home. But then we started to say, well, we wanted to show all the cubicles because we want to show the floor plans correctly. So sometimes they had a cubicle that they turned into a printer station, and we had given that a room type of cubicle. We actually said room type or room workstation, but then there's an assumption that there should be somebody assigned to that, even though it's a printer station, and it's a little bit of one of those things where there's no clean way to do it. Maybe you can come up with a workstation person and a workstation support room type or something like that.
We one of the ways we deal with that is status. It is a cubicle, but it's unoccupiable, and then we have room use or space use, and it might say print station. If you needed an easy reconfiguration, you could revert that cubicle or that workstation back into a space for somebody, excuse me, and then change the status. So if we just click the back arrow there where you are, and we'll just, again, just for the sake of it for a second, just click on the All Types button just while we're here.
All types, okay.
Yeah, and then this is the big list. So this is where everything is, and it's a little bit discombobulated, but in the case of St. Kate's or in the case of a new sandbox, this would all be very consistent in the way that it's categorized and the colors and the icons, and how things are named. And you just clicked on something that I really wanted you to see, which is if you click on that, this is where we can do all kinds of database stuff. And just as an example, like sorting and over on the filter side, that's all the Boolean logic, where this is where you can find anything. And all of our tables are the same in the way that they have this functionality. So if you just click on contains for a second, that little down arrow over on the right, so this is equal to, not equal to, contains this, doesn't contain that, begin with, and how to find the needle in the haystack. So that's pretty straightforward to a database guy. And then over on the right hand side, it says insert before and insert after. So let's just touch on there for a second. And then so this is where we can add columns as we need in the database. So there's better examples of this, but all throughout the system, there is this ability to add more columns that are not shown by default.
Is this actually editing the database structure for the client's database?
The we'll talk about database structure in addition to that in a bit. But these are all the hidden fields. If we wanted to turn on that date created, date modified, that's the audit trail, and every single entry in the system has a date created, date modified, tied to the login who did it. So there is this massive hidden audit trail of everything that's happened in the system.
Yeah. Really very. And by the way, I just have to say how impressed I am how clean this system is. It's very impressive.
Thank you. And and again, I think, as I said, there's only a handful of people that are into space, like space nerds, and the database is important because if we're going to visualize this data, we've got to have it connected to the drawings, of course, and so you really need the structure. But you'll note that it is almost a mirror reflection of early Archibus days, because the early versions of Archibus were pretty clean. They did a masterful job of being an industry leader. That the wheels kind of fell off at some point, but we'll talk about that another time. Just while we're here, a couple of things on that bar below the left arrow. There's a little check mark. Yeah. And if you click on that, that means we can go in and we can touch on each of these records and delete them if we needed to, or edit them. So we can select them all and delete them all and start again. So that is your record select, which maybe has more meaning in a contact table or an equipment table or something like that, where we're going to be bulk managing assets. And then the little magnifying glass is incredibly powerful. That's your search button, and you can search for anything. It's a fuzzy search, so you could put in like shaft or something like that, and it would find. There we go. Sure. Okay. So any instance of the word lab, LAB, is going to show up instantly as a reduced data set.
Piano lab, guitar lab. So that's the old music thing.
Well, you'll notice on the left, that's under the fish.
Right.
So that's K. That's elementary school to high school stuff. I think that's a dangerous marketplace. They got no money. They're strapped, but they still got a lot of real estate, and they still got a lot of space, and still have an obligation. And
their spaces are so small. Yeah.
You can see how somebody in a committee got involved in setting these up. This is we kind of inherited this from somebody there. Yeah, click the X and that'll, and there you go. Okay, so we can go back on the back arrow. Again, we're just covering some sort of fundamentals to get you poking around. We go back one more and we should wind up at the background data. And let's look, you'll notice that we have to the right there's space uses. And that's free form, like this is where you can add a space use like that, whatever you called it, the fly room or whatever. And these are just really unvalidated words that are often used and can be put on a drawing if somebody needs them. So that's another query where you want to turn on the space use in the drawing so that you can have this kind of information visible, which is kind of handy. And in this sample, you'll see where on the right it says count space. It's not being used, but it's there, and any of these can be brought in from a spreadsheet. Anything that you see in the database can be brought in from a spreadsheet, as long as there's proper spelling and all that kind of thing. Sure. So that's space uses. If we go back again.
By the way, off the top of my head, Nick, I would say this is this space uses table is just asking for trouble.
I don't disagree. It's not being used, but
tell you if you need it, add a new room type. But having something like this that's more free form, that's that's just, now you've got, oh, well, what's the room type? Well, the room, then people mix up what's the room type and the space use, and man, I can see that just being
I don't disagree, and there are probably other in corporate world other uses of that. If we go over to space status, which is probably more important, and so this is something that allows us to show from a space planning point of view what is the status of a space. And I think that was touched on as well in the space survey where this was expanded. So you can add new statuses of a space that as needed. So different ways to describe a space without trying to shoehorn it into other things. And we'll look at this in the drawing in just a moment or two. So we can go
interesting.
Back.
So yeah, let's just talk about this real quick. Couple of notes on top of my head. Number one question: do you have a hoteling management feature inside your system where you can have a person saying, yeah, I'm going to give you this cubicle from noon to 4 o'clock on Tuesday?
To some extent, and we could expand on it. It is a request-driven thing. However, what we found is because of COVID, everybody rushed out and got a quick fix solution for hoteling. There had to be 50 of them out there. And in a lot of cases, they were tied to Microsoft Outlook, which is a pain in the butt to do. So we have the ability to reserve a space, but not really down to the hours. Although we could certainly activate that. What we looked at was identifying what spaces were going to be available for hoteling, and they would then push those spaces and the polyline drawing out as an image to these other systems for micromanaging, the 50 spaces or so that they had in hoteling. which you'll notice up at the upper right there, there's hot desking, which is you can't book it. You just come in and grab one of these spaces, and it's not going to be managed. It's just designated as somewhere you could stop and put your laptop down, and what spaces are allocated to that without micromanaging the usage.
Yeah.
But that's sort of past now. And that's much more of a corporate thing. But
Yeah.
they had to micromanage it during COVID in a big way. Understood completely. But there's all kinds of I'll stress time and time again. Anything's possible if somebody can define exactly what they want and what the user experience is going to be, and is it of value. And that's a constant theme for us. So
so we hit
calendaring system for all of our preventive maintenance end of things, for move management, for doing work orders and things like that. All of that, all the calendaring and management of time is there. But that was one area that nobody really said to us, got to have it.
Yeah, and I can see where they wouldn't. The one thing that's in my brain, Nick, if you remember seeing it on my resume, it was probably not something that stood out to you a lot, was that I also had underneath me the a scheduling package at UC that we used for scheduling conference rooms and stuff. Basically scheduling everything except for courses. And the course scheduling system and my system worked very closely together, obviously, but it tied into space management so closely often. The hoteling thing, I can tell you, it was not a huge deal, but we did have people in the libraries and in different colleges that had study rooms that really wanted the ability to have the students to be able to reserve a room for up to 4 hours at a time for those study spaces. And it did solve a pretty big problem for them, but it was limited, on the number of rooms, and it's certainly not a priority in the top 5. But it is something that was out there that was a fix that we had that was pretty good, but it was not actually in the space management system. It was in the scheduling system.
Right. They took your building floor and room IDs and then utilized them elsewhere.
Exactly.
And we have a couple of companies that do that. There's one called Indoor Finders, and we integrate pretty closely with them and have built the API. And we supply them with geometry on the background from the drawing set, and a bunch of information from the database about what spaces are in this various statuses. It works great, and they have a mobile app, and there's a lot of big companies that are using that. And we just sort of said, fine, if people want to go into that, they have the kiosk interface in front of meeting rooms, and you can look in and see who's booked when and all that stuff. And I go, great, if it's already built, and people are liking what they have, then we're happy to backfeed it. As long as they're using the right space codes, we're happy, and good drawings, we're happy. Anyway,
one more question on this page. Can a space have more than one of these categories for it? Can it be assignable and for lease, or do you have to pick one?
I would think at the moment it would have to be just one. You could set up a new status that might be blended. And we'd have, again, you can set up as, why I wanted you to see the background data is that just click on that new status button as an example, just to show you what you get.
Yeah.
So, it's something that's going to show up on a list when you're in the CAD drawing itself that is going to be available as an option to apply to that particular space. So as opposed to showing two, you would set up one that might be a blended. It would be my
Right.
suggestion.
Yeah, and because it's top of my head, a lot of schools will have a lot of leased space. They may have, many buildings with hundreds of offices in them that are leased, and therefore they'd be assignable.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, and we can go into that. I did want to have a conversation, of course, about suites versus spaces, which is a whole nother database structure and a whole nother set of layers in our CAD drawing creation, which can overlay, because a lot of, as you had mentioned the other day, sometimes you're a landlord, sometimes you're a tenant, sometimes you're both. Sometimes things change, and so suites and spaces can't be in the same layer, and they can't be in the same database table, but they are still using the same building code and floor code. And we try to expand on what options are best for that. Typically, suites are based on BOMA calculations, because that's what the landlord is going to use as a guideline. And then once you move in, you're going to be either a FICM space use or an OSCAR space use inside that, which is typically inside a wall as opposed to center of wall. So the polyline, there could be two sets of polylines for a single floor.
So the suite, in your world, you're able to track basically rooms 101 through 105 is suite A, and rooms 106 through 113 is suite B?
Sure, yeah.
And then the reason those are in there is because they are structurally, architecturally set up as suites, and I assume in practice, most of those times, physics is in suite A and English is in suite B.
Yeah, and it's we see it in medical practice a lot.
Yeah, right.
Where a doctor consortium will own the building. They'll have their own practices in there and their own support facilities, and then they'll have some tenants, and those tenants have a certain number of suites or a single suite. And some of those tenants want to manage workspaces inside of that suite, like the doctors do of their own, and some don't care. So the ability to have it's down to the individual space if you're going to micromanage a department and its occupants. But in some cases, landlords don't give a hoot what's going on inside a suite. They've got a suite boundary. In most cases, they'd like to know where plumbing is, and they sometimes care about millwork, and of course walls can be easily demolished in a lot of suites. So they'll say, okay, here's the existing tenant improvement, but we're most concerned about plumbing because that's a real expensive thing to move in a suite. So if you're going to do a TI, maybe keep the plumbing where it is. But two different sort of reasons for being. So we do to answer your question, yeah, we do manage both, and as long as the space ID is unique, and if it's prefixed with a suite ID, that's fine. And it's 101 ABCD or 102-1-2-3, whatever makes sense. Obviously, workstation IDs should always have a 0102, not 01. Anyway, that's beside the point. So yeah, we can do that, and from both the tenant point of view and the landlord point of view.
Okay, got it.
But in this sample system, there really isn't anything to do with suites. We have that set up in another environment, and we have literally 40 or 50 different environments that you can go into, and all of them are somewhat unique. They start from a base framework, which to some degree is this sample system we're playing with, because we try to keep it up to date with some of the new innovations. And then when a new instance of a portal is required, we pull that from the latest and greatest.
I have another side question for you.
Sure, that's why we're here today.
One of the things I did at UC was me and a coworker ended up being in charge of doing room numbers for the campus.
Yeah.
So we assigned all the new room numbers every time there was a new space or there was a change in spaces, and we had a policy on what the standard was on how you number rooms. I'm guessing in your world, obviously you've got 3 higher education clients, and they're all different, and they've got different ways of looking at that, and then not even to get into the corporate stuff or the medical stuff, which can be very tricky from a room numbering standpoint.
Absolutely.
But do you find, just out of curiosity, do you find that when you're looking at some of these room numbers that you get from your clients, like, this doesn't even make any sense, room 101 is next to room 110, and room,
Well, yeah, you wonder, is this reflective of wayfinding? Like, are there really room numbers on these doors, or is this an architectural inherited from the architectural construction requirements, which have maybe no meaning at all?
Right.
And of course, best practices in room numbering is absolutely critical. And you might be writing a blog post on that. It's summarizing best practices and what you've learned over the years. Because yes, we've seen, I'll call it a dog's breakfast of room numbering, and then sometimes you'll see it very clear. But again, then there's spaces inside of spaces, which for years created a problem and had to be solved, where you have a big room, open space, but you've got 15 or 20 or more cubicles or workspaces inside of that, and how are they numbered? How do you create a standard for the new buildings compared to the older ones that people are sort of used to what the space IDs are. To answer your question, there is a lack of expertise around room numbering standards.
Yeah, and just a lack. And I'll tell you, the one thing that stood out when you were talking about that is and we've had this happen at UC, and we tried to be good about things, and we got a lot better than we used to be. But if somebody is feeding into the space management data where the room numbers are what was used in the construction documents from the architect, that can be super problematic if there's not oversight by the university, because, like you said, they may come up with their own set of room numbers for their own ease of use. And if that does not match what's on the floor plans, it can be a safety issue really big, especially depending upon who the fire system is keying off of. They keying off of space management or the architectural drawings. And if those two aren't the same, people could get hurt, which is obviously the most important thing, but a school could get in a lot of trouble if somebody's trying to get to a heart attack victim and they can't find it because the room numbers don't match. That's a big deal.
Who's in charge of space? And facilities people don't get the respect they deserve. Of course, we'll all say that because we're into space.
Right.
But you don't mess around with the accounting system and their codes, and whether you agree with them or not, you don't create your own or make a whole alternate set of budget codes and expect it to fly. Uh, and so I think it's been, where if there aren't good drawings that are easily read by novices, properly color coded with a legend, and there's clarity. I like to call it data visualization, where you can back up why this is important, about how are stairwells numbered, how are hallways numbered. There's fire poles and fire extinguishers in hallways, and and every building we look at, they tend to number the hallways in some obscure way, and that's just not good practice, because once it gets committed to the polylines, it
Right.
should be good practice, and that's
Absolutely.
that's where you can inherit anything from the architects. Guess what? They're long gone. They're never going to change. They've been paid. They're gone. You're lucky to get
Exactly. And by the way,
EWG.
yeah, and I just to be clear, and I don't want to emphasize this too much or go down a rabbit hole, but yeah, you and I are talking about a slightly different thing, or a little bit of a different thing. Obviously, consistent and well designed room numbers is really important. But what I was talking about is when the university comes up with a room numbering scheme, but the architectural construction documents don't reflect that because
Right.
they just
Oh, yeah.
moved on with what they do. Then, when the fire system gets coded, and this happened at UC, and it's embarrassing. Sometimes the fire code vendor would take the drawings from the architect and use
yeah.
those as the official room number. And so they don't match reality. They don't match the signs. They don't match the space management floor plans. And a fireman can literally not be able to find a heart attack victim because there's a disconnect there. And that's unacceptable.
Completely. Yeah, completely.
And I was just, and that's not space. That's not your problem to solve, but it's something that you need to make your clients aware of. That you might want to check your systems and make sure they're all using the exact same room numbers, because it's very important from a safety standpoint.
It is certainly a best practice, and that I think that in today's world, just to put on the marketing hat for a moment, in today's world, the sharing of knowledge and best practices and expertise is maybe some of the best marketing messages that there can be out there. Because things like little things that is not a little thing, that is a big thing, are so important. And if people don't feel like they have control over their drawings because they don't have a CAD expert or something like that on staff, they are going to get a real mixed bag, and it could have consequences. It's not really acceptable in the sense of what you pay for a new building overall, and what the deliverables are beyond the physical. The digital deliverables really have to dovetail into your ways of doing business. And
absolutely,
and
that's
somehow
often not considered.
Yeah, and that's the life cycle of the building. It took 2.5, 3 years to build, and you got to live with it for 50 years. And what did we get in the way of valuable digital documentation about that facility from the architects, engineers, and contractors? They're like pulling teeth, getting something of value from them, and I've seen that all my life, and they don't really care about facilities management. They want to build and
yes,
and get paid and get out of the way and have no more liabilities, and the story. So, but I think that now when you look at a building that is being built today, they could easily have a lifespan beyond 50 years, and they're costing a lot, more than people expect. and they better get used correctly and better be managed correctly. I think that the amount of dollars that are sunk capital cost wise into a university is immense.
Yes,
And course management, but I'm preaching to the choir here.
you got it. All right. Any other
Okay,
things
so
you want
anyway,
to
just,
get
just
to here? Yeah.
hit the back button. So any of these things you'll see that just as an example, let's go down the problem categories for a second under work management. Where this is not space, but the same idea that these are the kinds of problems that we have, and then any one of these you can click on. Electrical or something, safety or security. And
By the way, I've got another
yeah,
quick
sure.
comment here. I would change the name of this from problem category
Yes.
to service opportunity category or something like that.
I like that.
Yeah, this is our problem. What part of the space management system do you use? I use the problem area all the time. I don't know if people want to be associated with problem categories,
Yeah,
but
well, yeah, and certainly, in most cases, they are called service requests,
yeah,
and you'll see that in a moment. But I'm just showing you sort of the background data, how these tables are structured. Everything can have a friendly name in the system,
yep,
and that's a good example of being less problematic. But each one of these, if you click on electrical, just as an example, and view details, you
oh,
see
okay,
that
here we go.
slide out, yeah. Okay, so over on the left-hand side there, you'll see the problem types, and you
Yep,
scroll down, and this is typically already being done in your CMMS system. We have a CMMS system, but it's not the first thing that we're going to be selling to somebody. If they don't have a space management system with us, we wouldn't want them to have a work management system because the two are so integrated together.
right.
But this again is this notion, and you're going to see it everywhere, of categories and types. So there's a big category, and then there are subtypes or types underneath that, and that's a real nice way to manage database structure. And this background
Right.
data is set up in conjunction with a client to meet what their needs are. We like to think that with subject matter expertise, we've pre-populated as many of the things that are commonly used in regards to space types and problem types and all this sort of thing. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of how the back end is exposed. And this is more of an admin task. We would not be suggesting anybody else really spends a lot of time in here, but it's important that you see how things tie together.
So just, and I think we
Yep.
touched on this before, but I just want to make sure I understand. It is just say that there was a new type of problem type that they wanted to add, that they come across a lot where it's the, I don't know.
As an example, people use a problem type called other,
Okay,
which
yeah,
is no great
right.
surprise.
That's kind of the catch-all. But is
Yeah,
this
and then
something?
if there's a whole
Is this
bunch of others that are always the same, it's like, okay, well, we should, recognize that and
exactly? My
expand on that.
question is this something where your clients can go in and add on their own, or is
Sure,
this
right where it
something?
says create new,
Okay.
right there, just above your,
Yeah,
create new, and there, under electrical category, create a new problem type and give it a caption, and you're good to
yeah,
go.
like
It'll show up on all.
sign malfunction, or sign
Sure,
off,
that's
you know.
that would be fine. And then you fill in the caption wherever that little red triangle is, means it's mandatory.
Yes.
Or you can put exactly
Right.
the same word there in lowercase, upper and lowercase. So just put sign off.
Do I? Yeah. Sign, uh, color, I don't know, won't signage. I'll just put signage, and then down the caption,
Sure.
it'll be, uh, you know, flickers or something.
Okay. No, that's fine. Then hit save.
So
And
now they've got, and I'm just
yep.
thinking about database structure in our long conversation about customizing versus configuring. That's a
Yeah.
configuration thing, but it's not a problem, is it?
No.
If you've got one client who has added this and the others don't have it, life is just absolutely fine. It's not a problem. True statement?
Absolutely. Yeah. We treat every instance as unique. There's some fundamental new tools that we add or new functionality that we add to the platform, but we would never force anything on anybody. In a lot of cases, we've got customers. We did a major upgrade a couple of years ago after COVID, where we had made everything mobile. So everything you are doing today, everything you see, can be done on a phone or a tablet as well as on a desktop, knowing that most facilities people like yourself are going to be in a desktop environment with 1, 2, or 3 screens and have a laptop and a phone and a tablet, and everything should be the same. So we have migrated all of our clients to the new mobile-friendly version, which was a big deal. And now they've got an instance, and some of them say, "I don't want to change a thing. Everything's great. I don't want to."
Right.
Don't be upsetting my Apple Card. I don't have time for an upgrade. I don't need anything. Don't bug me. I don't want to pay for anything. Great. I don't have a problem with that at all. Other clients go, "Hey, I want to add the move management capability or the EHS or some other visitor management or something like that." Then we add that in and tailor that to their needs, and it might be completely different than the guy down the street.
Yeah. And here's my
yeah.
Here's what was going on in my head when I was asking that question, is because I've run into systems before where they were configurable by the client, and the clients, due to their inexpertise in databases, will create a new problem type here for every sign. So it'll be sign flickers, Joni's sign flickers English sign flick, and all of a sudden you've got, instead of 18 items here, you've got 58, and now every instance is different because they've gone and they've just overdone it because they don't get it.
We've inherited quite a few Archibus database systems over the years, and it did allow you to create room standards, and you'll remember this
Right.
well. There were literally hundreds of them, and typos and upper and lower case mix, and, just a mess. And that's not best practice. What we would like to do is try to have as many of the obvious things already pre-populated, and then gives you enough of a flavor of how it all works that if you add a new item like this, you might say, "Oh, I don't like, I've got this flickers in uppercase. Everything else seems to be in lowercase. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to change that to upper and lowercase to be consistent." And you hope that, no, leave that one uppercase. You'll see over on the left there that is, the categories are always uppercase.
Okay.
And the caption is
Okay.
a lot more friendly.
Okay.
But again, just a little example of how we're poking around. And on the right-hand side, those are the security rules and roles that are available, where you can assign certain problem types and probably more often categories to these different people, but each of those roles, just because we happen to see them, is
Right.
a separate dashboard with availability of different processes. So you might imagine that a trades worker is going to have an awful thin dashboard. Here's my tickets, and maybe I can submit a ticket and I can look at a floor plan, but I can't assign a ticket to somebody else. I can't modify a space drawing, and then the work submitter at the bottom is essentially any staff who is in our contact table, which at a university could be 8 or 10,000 people.
Right.
They can put in a ticket, and they got an email address, and they'll get notified if their service request got approved and what actually happened to it. But they really can't do very much. They might be able to look at a drawing if you want them to or not. So each of these roles you are assigned as an administrator up at the top there, so you
Right.
get to do what any of these people do.
By the way, this is really, again, very clean, very impressive. I like it. The where you see ran into some problems, not earth shattering problems, is where people were sharing. They had two different roles. They were a space server and they were a space editor
Yes.
or a space super. So and those two roles have different categories, and so it's like, well, which one do you assign them to? If you assign that person as a trade supervisor, then they're not going to be able to do the space survey. If you assign them as a space surveyor, they're not going to be able to do what the trade
Yeah.
supervisor does. And it's not that huge a deal, but it's a little bit of a thing.
Well, and again, this is just a base framework in the sense
Yeah.
that anybody in a staff role that is a system user, which we have unlimited users, there isn't a cost today
Right.
for users,
Yeah.
especially around space. They get a custom dashboard, and they may have space editor rights, and then they also get complete control of the space survey capability. Whereas if you are a space surveyor, you might be a hired contractor, or you might be on the janitorial team. And as you saw in that video on space survey, they got a pretty locked down system. They can walk around between these hours, touch on these spaces, and indicate if somebody's there or not. And so they were assigning at the bank in Europe. They were assigning janitorial staff to walk the floors a couple of times a day for 2 weeks, and they had no other access to anything. They only could see their floor, and they could only do exactly what the system was shaped to do for them.
Impressive. Very nice.